Reagan-Bush administration officials inside the CIA, at the Defense Department, and at the National Security Agency knew in 1986 about the extra money Oliver North and his operatives were making off secret sales of missiles to Iran. President Bush, through his spokesman, said again today he has not discussed pardoning North. CBS News law correspondent Rita Braver has more on the aftermath of the North guilty verdict.
Oliver North was not talking about his conviction today, but the jurors who convicted him were, and they seem to have both admiration and sympathy for him.
He was a great man. It was no doubt about it.
One man can run the show. A lieutenant, colonel, no. North was used and abused. It don't make no sense.
He's a heck of a man, I really think so. He done good for the country, I really think he did.
Well, then can I ask, why would you vote, why would you convict him of 3 felonies?
Really didn't want to. Really didn't want to. Well, one day we found evidence, and then he admitted it too.
We prayed, and we cried. We cried. It was very, very difficult. We cried.
Late today, juror Tara King admitted she has been a habitual drug user in the past, but King insisted she stopped drug use before the trial.
I'm still a clear-minded person, and I felt comfortable, and I felt good when I left the courthouse.
It is unclear what impact this will have, but it's sure to be one of many issues on which North's lawyers appeal the conviction.
Another issue is whether North's due process rights were violated because he was not allowed to call President Reagan to make out his authorization defense.
But prosecutors believe the verdict will stand. And even with the trial ended, it is still making news. In settlement of a lawsuit by news organizations, including CBS News, the government today released a classified trial document showing that higher-ups in the Reagan administration knew early on about overcharges on Iran arms for hostages shipments. The brief summary of highly secret intelligence intercept material shows that several top officials, including the late CIA Director William Casey and former Defense Chief Caspar Weinberger, received the information. The document raises the question of why no senior officials asked where the extra money was going until the story of the diversion of Iran arms profits to the Contras began to unravel in late 1986. And it is the kind of information that might be useful to former National Security Council Chief John Poindexter, arms merchant Richard Secord, and moneyman Albert Hakim, who are still awaiting trials for their roles in the Iran-Contra affair. But perhaps what the three are most concerned about tonight is the fact that their colleague, Oliver North, has now been convicted of 3 felonies. Rita Braver, CBS News, Washington.
President Reagan insisted the Iran-Contra affair began simply as an attempt to open a dialogue with Iranian, quote, moderates. Today, one so-called moderate, Parliament Speaker Rafsanjani, called for extreme action, a worldwide campaign of Palestinian terrorism against Americans. Correspondent Anthony Mason in London has our report.
Rafsanjani's anti-American barrage was blistering, especially coming from the man once seen as Iran's only approachable moderate. As thousands of Iranians demonstrated against Israel on Jerusalem Day, Iran's parliamentary speaker called on Palestinians to execute 5 Americans or Westerners for every Palestinian killed. He urged them to hijack Western planes and blow up Western factories. It's not hard to kill Americans, Rafsanjani said. There are so many everywhere in the world. The State Department reacted with outrage.
We hold the Iranian leadership responsible for any attacks on American interests or citizens.
Iran already has one death threat outstanding against the West. Ayatollah Khomeini has ordered the execution of British author Salman Rushdie, whose novel The Satanic Verses, he says, blasphemes Islam. But Rafsanjani's speech is viewed by most as more of a political maneuver, an attempt to shed his moderate image in Iran's increasingly radical climate.
He knows that the Iranian revolution devours its own children. So as he prepares for the presidential election in the summer of '89, he must be more pure and more radical than others.
But some fear Rafsanjani's remarks may put more American lives at risk.
I think there are enough receptive ears among the young Palestinians. They are very, very frustrated after all, and they are extreme. And some of them are quite disappointed with the performance of their leaders, Mr. Arafat, for example.
In Beirut today, pro-Iranian Hezbollah fighters, the group believed to hold most of the Western hostages, also rallied to Rafsanjani's theme. It was Rafsanjani who was always seen as the link to Hezbollah, the hope for new hostage negotiations. Tonight, that hope seems more remote than ever. Anthony Mason, CBS News, London.
President Bush today appointed a team of official U.S. observers to monitor the presidential election in Panama this Sunday. The Panamanian government said they will not be welcome. U.S. officials charged that dictator Manuel Noriega aims to steal the election for the man he's backing. CBS News correspondent Juan Vasquez is on the scene in Panama City.
Carlos Duque, General Noriega's hand-picked candidate for president, has reason to smile. With all the advantages supplied by the Noriega regime, he's been able to turn out tens of thousands for massive rallies in which the main target seems to be that old favorite, Yankee aggression.
I indeed gave the Panamanian opposition $10 million for the coming elections.
Even President Bush, complete with phony voice, appears in a government political commercial. The government's words coming out of his mouth to support claims of U.S. intervention.
If the United States doesn't like our type of democracy, well, that's just too bad.
Noriega says Panamanians are furious at the U.S. He's distributed arms to civilians in preparation for what he claims is an imminent U.S. invasion. The opposition has been able to hold its own enormous rallies in spite of government obstacles. Independent polls show the opposition winning by as much as 2-1. But the government published a poll today showing its candidates in the lead. The opposition is already claiming fraud. More than 100,000 new voters that no one can account for, and thousands of people registered more than once.
An investigation done with approximately 4,000 names of people who have died recently show that 27% of them continue to appear in the electoral register.
While Noriega paints the opposition as American puppets, the U.S. is stuck with a policy of support for a president no one remembers, who doesn't even live in Panama anymore. Former Presidents Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter are heading an official delegation of observers. The U.S. says it won't recognize the winner of a fraudulent election. Neither will the opposition.
There's a good old American saying, all hell is going to break loose sooner or later. It's either now or 3 or 4 months down the line.
To his critics, to the United States, Noriega is the issue. But even if the opposition were to win a fair election, Noriega still has nowhere to go. So he would remain here, in control of the armed forces, in control of Panama, win or lose. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Panama City.
And still to come on the Friday CBS Evening News, storms and tornadoes whip around the South. Peter Van Sant on technical pioneering in outer space. And David Browning on some tiny technology in everyday life. Yes, 7 people are feared dead tonight after a tornado smashed into a drugstore in Toccoa, Georgia. Storm damage forced the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival to cancel most of its activities after 75-mile-an-hour wind gusts left some 40,000 New Orleans area residents without power last night. More than 9 inches of rain fell in Monroe, Louisiana, forcing some people there to flee their homes. And for northeastern Texas, it was the second day of an onslaught linked to 5 deaths as tornadoes swept the area and torrential rains fed floodwaters. Space Shuttle Atlantis doing well in orbit after sending off the spacecraft Magellan toward an August 1990 rendezvous with Venus. Correspondent Peter Van Sant has the latest on the U.S. in space.
Asleep and circling the Earth at 17,000 miles per hour, the crew of the Shuttle Atlantis this morning received a musical wake-up call from NASA's front desk, Mission Control in Houston.
Atlantis, Houston, good morning, and congratulations on a super day yesterday.
The crew accomplished its main mission, the release of the Magellan spacecraft, which is now more than 150,000 miles from Earth, streaking toward the planet Venus from the boost of its so-called IUS rocket.
It turns out that the IOS has put us almost dead center on the right path. We are sitting back and watching and having a lot of fun.
as Atlantis crosses along the north coast of Libya, along the Mediterranean Sea.
With their major goal already accomplished, the 5-member crew of Atlantis turned to more mundane tasks, photographing lightning and conducting an experiment to test crystal growth in space.
You can see we have FDA here. We are starting the melt. There's a lot of indium in here, and we hope to make a solid crystal out of it.
The crew's workload is lighter than on past missions because the Magellan spacecraft was so heavy, it left little room for other experiments on board.
There are a number of different science opportunities that we're performing. They may look a little scattered, but there's a bunch of them, and it keeps the crew quite busy.
One reason why the crew will stay in space until Monday is that the effects of space sickness usually wear off after 4 days in orbit, leaving the crew in good health for the landing in the California desert. Peter Van Sant, CBS News at the Johnson Space Center.
The Labor Department today reported that the nation's civilian unemployment rate jumped 0.3% in April to 5.3%. That confirms analysts' belief that the economy is slowing.
April in Paris.
You'll feed your whole lawn in minutes. You'll see lush green results in days. Stern's Miracle Grow Lawn Food. For a Miracle Grow lawn you'll be proud of.
House Speaker Jim Wright's Fight Back campaign against continuing attacks on his ethics today included a speech in Texas. Subject, law and ethics in government. CBS News correspondent Deborah Potter reports on Speaker Wright's battle for his job and reputation.
House Speaker Jim Wright stepped up his defense against charges of ethical wrongdoing today before a friendly hometown audience, sharply attacking the motives of his critics.
In these 40 years of public life, the most unethical behavior I've witnessed is that of those who, for their own ravening ambition, attempted to destroy the personal reputation of their political opposition.
Wright had no comment on new questions about his financial dealings, in particular his investment in a Texas nursing home in 1983. After taking a loan from this Texas bank, Wright invested $100,000 in Jewel Enterprises, which had close financial ties to the bank. Jewel then paid Wright at least $22,000 over a 3-year period, even though the company was close to insolvency and was paying other investors nothing. Wright's attorney told CBS News that the speaker did not seek preferential treatment and had no idea the other investors weren't paid. Wright did not report all of the income he received on his financial disclosure forms as required by law. Even though Jewel eventually went bankrupt, with Wright losing most of his original investment, the House Ethics Committee wants to know more.
Certainly it will be a point of discussion with the committee, and I think relatively soon, meaning next week.
The committee already is weighing possible new charges against Wright stemming from his investment in an oil venture in this Texas lake. So far, it's a dry hole, but last year it netted the speaker a huge profit. Business associates today appeared before the committee to defend Wright's involvement.
I'm just here to set the record straight on Sabine Lake.
How?
And, well, just to give them the facts.
As each new revelation raises fresh doubts about the speaker's political survival, Wright is preparing for what amounts to a trial before the committee later this month. Next week, he's expected to name a new legal team to defend him in the fight of his life. Deborah Potter, CBS News on Capitol Hill.
Senator John Breaux of Louisiana says he will introduce legislation next week to scrap and replace Washington's whole Nuclear Regulatory Commission. CBS News correspondent Mark Phillips reports this comes amid accusations that some nuclear power plant workers were given hush money to cover up safety violations, that the supposedly watchdog NRC knew about it but did nothing.
The Comanche Peak Atomic Power Plant not far from Fort Worth, Texas. It's not even operating yet, but has become the center of a nuclear storm about hush money and coercion.
This stinks.
What Senator Alan Simpson thinks stinks is what happened to this man.
Oh, yeah, I was squashed. They stepped on me.
They is the Houston construction firm Brown & Root. And Joseph Machtal says they stepped on him when he began complaining that there were safety problems with the plant.
I became very, very fearful for the community.
Machtal told a Senate committee this week that he was first fired for his whistleblowing about the plant and then forced to agree to a secret termination contract, which was effectively a gag order. Machtal, who says he was broke at the time, was paid $35,000. The contract forbids McTowell from voluntarily appearing before any licensing proceedings about the plant, or if subpoenaed, that he resists.
Let me ask the question. The person on the street that looks at this says, my God, what are they doing?
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has refused to outlaw the agreement, saying public safety is not compromised. Those with concerns can still call NRC officials on the phone.
How does he do it?
He calls directly to talk to Tom Murley.
I can't get some of those people on the phone. You telling me a person who's a fired worker out in Texas is going to be able to get you on the phone and say, let me tell you what's happening out there?
Frankly, I think that's the most effective way to do it, to call.
Senators are more than skeptical. They think it's illegal. With the second hush money case at Comanche Peak and 2 other proposed deals at this plant in Millstone, Connecticut, the committee today referred the matter to the Department of Justice for investigation. Under pressure, the NRC has now asked all nuclear power facilities in the country to report whether there are any more money for silence deals out there. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Washington.
A federal judge in Texas ordered the FBI today to, quote, improve the fairness of its policy for promoting minority agents. This follows a ruling by the judge in September that the FBI discriminated against Hispanic agents in promotions, assignments, and discipline.
Taking home whole wheat total?
Special K.
Hope you're hungry, because you'll need almost 3 boxes of Special K to equal the vitamin and mineral nutrition in just 1 box of Total.
I've got Nutri-Grain.
You'll need 4 boxes. And you?
Just shredded wheat.
12 boxes. Total, 1 bowl, 100%. No other cereal has more vitamin and mineral nutrition. And next time, pick up Total. If it's whole wheat Total, it's Total Nutrition.
Originally, I was taking aspirin for my headaches. Aspirin would sometimes irritate my stomach, and I called the doctor, and he told me to try Tylenol. It wouldn't cause the stomach irritation that aspirin can. Tylenol really worked for me. It got rid of my headaches. I didn't have any problems after I took Tylenol.
Lana Carson trusts Tylenol. Its pain reliever is in a class by itself.
It's a wonderful pain reliever for me, and it works great.
When you grip a Delta faucet, you get more than just water. You get a chance to express yourself. Do it right now, and Delta will foot part of the bill. Up to $35 toward installation costs. Call toll-free by May 31st for rebate details and our free brochure, because now is the time to grab the phone and a great deal when you get a grip on yourself with Delta.
No box score can measure the ordeal of Cincinnati baseball manager Pete Rose since February 20th, when he was called into the commissioner's office. Since then, there have been continuing reports about Rose and gambling, reports and rumors, but so far, no proof and no legal action. And now critics are beginning to ask if Rose is not the centerpiece in a game of balks, timeouts, and wild pitches. Frank Courier has our report.
As drenching rains threaten tonight's game at home, Pete Rose is still recovering from bronchitis, but ready to rejoin his first-place Reds. Meanwhile, there's confusion over baseball's announcement that Commissioner Bart Giamatti will be handed a long-awaited investigative report on Rose next week.
And you shouldn't be confused by people alleging that they're confused.
The 11-week-old gambling probe may not be over soon. Investigator John Dowd has told Rose's lawyers that his report is not preliminary, not final, it's just a report. The investigation is continuing. And so is the suspense and speculation. But the never-ending questions, did Pete Rose bet on baseball and will he be suspended, are now obscured by people asking, what's taking so long and what does Bart Giamatti have on Pete Rose?
Feels he has to take this long to make it right, you know. It's got to take this long.
It's got to be solid evidence, and as far as we know, there is no solid evidence yet. If there were, I'm sure we'd have a decision. Giamatti's going to have to say there is nothing or there is something. Sooner or later, he's got to say that. He just can't let it dangle forever.
Dangling. The issue of whether justice delayed is also denied, and the letter Giamatti sent last month to a federal judge praising the truthfulness of testimony given by drug dealer bookie Ron Peters against Rose have left legal scholars divided.
I think it already has turned into an injustice. I'm speaking strictly as a lawyer and not as a Pete Rose fan.
It really was necessary for the commissioner to be very careful
important for him not to rush to judgment, no matter what his ultimate conclusion may be.
The embattled manager scoffs at suggestions he should quit.
And I will never step down. And no one's asked me to step down.
With his career and legend on the line, Pete Rose remains anxious to tell the commissioner his side of the story. But even if next week's report is definitive, no one can predict how many more days or weeks remain before the final, if not overdue, judgment. Frank Courier, CBS News, Cincinnati.
They came across country by wagon and settled in Manna, Iowa. Whatever they needed, they made by hand. Made it the best it could be. That same fundamental is still practiced today in Amana, Iowa, the home of Amana Appliances, a Raytheon company. Whatever you make it the best it can be. Raytheon, where quality starts with fundamentals.
It's a weather delay.
There are headaches.
Now the computer's down.
And headaches. There's aspirin and Anacin. The Anacin aspirin formula relieves headaches better than regular aspirin.
Headache better?
Not just better, better.
Anacin, better relief.
Ever try this coffee?
Oh, no. I use a special blend, brewed fresh.
So do we. But then we freeze dry it to lock in superior flavor and aroma until you release it.
Perfect. Who are you?
We're Taster's Choice.
Hot tea all day doesn't stop this denture era from hitting high C.
Hot tea? Fix-it-ent and forget it.
Give up hot chocolate just because I started wearing dentures? Scam!
Hot chocolate? Fix-it-ent and forget it. Heat-resistant Fix-it-ent spreads evenly to keep on fixing loose spots, no matter how often it gets hot.
I can drink hot coffee all day and still help a lady.
Heat-resistant. One more reason to use Fix-it-ent and forget it.
In simpler times, the way you looked for a lost pet was to wander around the neighborhood calling its name. No more. We're far too sophisticated for that now. And David Browning tells us the high-tech trail of the lost pet might lead directly to Big Brother.
Please stay.
You are looking at some of America's first electronic pets.
Yes, you're next.
The shot they're getting isn't a vaccine, but a tiny microchip with a computer code for identifying lost, stolen, or strayed animals.
Doesn't seem to be painful at all. We have very few cats or dogs, kittens, or puppies even react.
What does react is a special sensing device. Run it over the animal, and it prints out a number. Check the number with a central computer, and presto, Kitty or Rover is headed home.
From the time that the phone rings until the time that we can identify the owner and have the animal shelter people getting in touch with the owner can be less than a minute.
And it's not just kitties and puppies. These tiny electronic tags have also been injected in salmon to track their spawning habits on the Columbia River. Sea lions along the Pacific coast have been tagged, too, to tell scientists more about their behavior. And in San Diego, they put microchip tags on Chevys and Nissans. With a microchip on your windshield, you can sail right on through the toll plaza on the Coronado Bridge. The chip tells the computer each time you make the trip. The computer sends you a bill each month. No stopping, less congestion. So, the good news is microchips can track pets and ease traffic. That's the good news.
The bad news is that conceivably in some governments you could implant a chip in everybody so you could track their movements all the time. And, you know, Big Brother would indeed be upon us.
Already, there are less sinister electronic tagging devices for humans. Courts let some low-risk offenders serve part of their sentence at home, wearing a sensor that lets authorities know if they stray too far away.
They have up to about 150-foot radius away from the monitor hooked up in their home. So some people who do live in an apartment complex have to call us when they go out to the mailbox or sometimes out to the trash dumpster because it does signal that they have left the facility.
This man, a convicted Los Angeles slumlord.
6-100.